Hi everyone, so on the show this week, a book review. I've got this rather splendid thing here. Tarot and Divination Cards, a visual archive by Laetitia Barbier. Now this is a visual archive and it is a very nice visual archive. And I will be showing you this book. I'll be comparing it to, other tarot coffee table books. And I will be enumerating its many good qualities. Okay, so just before I start to talk about the text, I want to say that probably it's a thumbs up to this book. I think really it's a very nice book to have about. It's probably even better than the Taschen one in some respects. But before we start, I do need to say something about the text. And One looks for a balanced way of saying this. Okay, how can I put this politely? I think that in contemporary publishing, publishers are cutting back on editing. They maybe don't hire people to check the text quite as rigorously as they used to. Okay, so this book is written by a French lady, a very cultured person. Obviously, she's done quite a lot of research for the book, and a lot of the research is pretty cool. It's not nonsense like the Jodorowsky book. But it is written in a style which is quite difficult to read. It's a sort of a little bit of a blend between French and English in a way. I mean, it's written in English, but she uses English as if it's French. Some of the sentences don't actually make sense. There are small mistakes and there are sentences that are quite mystifying. And on top of this, she will then go ahead and use words which probably are very similar to highfalutin French words, but which the average English person would not know at all. So she uses the word tergiversated, to tergiversate. Now, do you know that word? I mean, I should know that word. I'm a writer, and it is in the Concise Collins Dictionary, but I was unfamiliar with the word to tergiversate. And she will use words which are a bit like sort of the words that come out of wokeversity these days, like tentacularity. She talks about something's tentacularity, which presumably means, it's the effect it has of behaving like tentacles. Tentacularity. I mean, I think they do that in France all the time. She also uses words like and then she'll misuse a word completely, like someone. This was as a result of a failed paramour. She means a failed amour, not a failed paramour. A paramour is a person, not a thing. And then she will just misuse English words. So I've got that out of my system. That's my first objection to this book, and it does make it difficult to read. What makes it impossible to read? Well, for me, I just want to say something about tarot scholarship. There are writers who are scholarly and writers who aren't scholarly. You don't have to be scholarly to write a great tarot book or even to be a good tarotiste. I am not scholarly. I am not a tarot scholar, but I can tell the difference between a scholarly book and a not scholarly book. Look, A Cultural History of Tarot by Helen Farley. This is a scholarly book. It's written by a woman who is an academic, and she's absolutely rigorous, and she treats facts very seriously. She treats research very seriously. It's quite a short book, but about a third of it is notes at the end to give you her sources. There are other scholarly people like Decker and Dummett are pretty scholarly, even though they don't like tarot. They're kind of like 90% scholarly. And then you have good writers like Paul Hewson, who is sort of maybe 75% scholarly. He's quite respectful and he's quite hardworking, but he's not as razor sharp scholarly as someone like Helen Farley. Then you have people who are really could be accused of not being scholarly at all. The chief offender, I think, is Alejandro Jodorowsky, whose book was published in the 21st century after many facts about tarot had been established by, hard-working people. And he fills his book up with absolute nonsense. Like, he insists that tarot was, invented around the year 1000 and that it was invented by a cabal of Christians, Muslims and Jews. And, these things are just miles away from the truth. And then you get books which are, frankly, not scholarly, but have layers and layers and layers of factoids shoved into them. Like, I think, Rachel Pollack's 78 Degrees of Wisdom. It's not a scholarly book, and it contains all sorts of post-hippie assumptions that are never really proven or made explicit, and there are no notes at the end of the book to give you her sources. Now, this lady here, she has read Helen Farley. She refers to Helen Farley's, and she's read quite a lot. There is a lot of factual accuracy in this book, but early on she confesses that her influences are Rachel Pollack and Alejandro Jodorowsky, with a bit of Mary K. Greer thrown in. And the result is that there's stuff in this book which is just it's just speculation, and it's based on feelings rather than facts. And I'll give you a very specific example and then I'll move on, okay? Now we get to the Papess card, which is where she started to lose me. Now you start off with a picture of Rihanna dressed as a female pope. Now that is absolutely spot on. That's splendid, because the Papess card in the tarot is basically a transgressive card. How do I know this? Because I've read Helen Farley's book, and one assumes that Laetitia Barbier, if she refers to Helen Farley, one assumes that she has read this book from cover to cover. But let me tell you what she says about the Papess card. She says this: commissioned by the aristocracy of northern Italy, it's hard to believe that these early Trionfi cards would mock the validity of the Roman Catholic authority. Okay, what I would say is that, it might be hard to believe that if you hadn't read about the historical background. But as we find out in this book, the period of the Italian Renaissance was actually not a period in which the church was in a particularly strong position. Its power was being very undermined. It was being undermined by humanism. Furthermore, Italy was not a country. It was a collection of city-states. And some of these city-states didn't particularly like the church and didn't particularly like the Pope. Now, the tarot was probably invented by the Duke of Milan. Now, the Milanese went to war with the Pope. They had battles with the papal troops. There was a cousin of the Duke of Milan who was involved in a kind of like a cult or a conspiracy to found an alternative church, an alternative version of Christianity. They were called the Guglielmites or the Juliamites. And this alternative Christianity was going to have a female pope, okay? And this female pope, if she had happened, was going to be one of the cousins of the Duke of Milan. Now, as far as I remember, this lady was captured by the papal troops and hideously executed. Now, do you get my point? That if you know these facts, it's a long way from believing that, oh, the Pope just ruled the world. He just ruled Europe and he gave out orders and everyone did what they were told. It's absolutely not true. The Duke of Milan, the guy for whom the tarot was probably commissioned, was a religious man. He said his prayers, he believed in God, but he did not believe in the church and he was not in favour of the Pope. He was the Pope's enemy. So to have a Pope card at all in a pack of cards is already quite irreverent. It's already quite transgressive. To have a Papess, oh, that's the Pope's wife, ha ha, that's extremely transgressive. So when we go back to Laetitia Barbier's comment, commissioned by the aristocracy of northern Italy, it's hard to believe that these early Triumphi cards would mock the validity of the Roman Catholic authority. You know, this is just... I'm trying to think of polite words. It's basically just the prejudices of a 21st century person who has a certain belief about how history was. Okay, that it was a patriarchy. Now, I'm not, as I said before, I'm not against feminism. What I think is so odd is that this modern kind of conception of how history was, you know, oppression, power, patriarchy this, patriarchy that, it gets in the way of more interesting things. It's like people today think that the concept of dissent, you know, was invented by Foucault in the 1970s. It wasn't. The Duke of Milan in the 15th century dissented. He did not like the Pope. The Milanese went to war with the Pope. Do you see what I'm saying? There was dissent then and there's dissent now. So the Papes card, in my humble opinion, is a much stronger feminist, if you like, gesture than, than a book like this would have us believe. The book like this gives us Rihanna taking the piss out of the Pope. Terrific. And then says, oh, but you know, it's hard to believe that the Papes card was taking the piss out of the papacy. So, yeah, nonsense. I gave up reading. I gave up reading after that Papes chapter. There are very charming things about the text. She quotes David Bowie and she quotes my great hero Mark Bolan. And so I think in some ways we have things in common. But it really frustrates me that someone could reference Helen Farley and then not listen to what Helen Farley has to tell us about the origins of the tarot. So read this book first, and then you'll be immune to all the fantasies that you might read in less scholarly books. Okay, well, let's have a quick gander at the book. As I pointed out in my short on this subject, it is really remarkably similar in some respects to the Taschen book on the same subject. Taschen book came out 1 year before, and Taschen is a behemoth, isn't it? They can't really do anything wrong. German company, they really specialize in design. They specialize in coffee table. And just to give you a quick glance, this is a book about tarot design with quite a strong presence of 20th century tarot design. So at the beginning you get some historical stuff here, and then when they've dispensed with the historical stuff, then you've got all this of really 20th century and 21st century. And it's just a great pleasure to see how far tarot design has been pushed over the years. And clearly it doesn't give you samples of the thousands of decks that exist, but maybe it gives you up to about 2012, it gives you sort of the best and most striking ones. So that's a completely visual delight. It has less text than Laetitia Barbier's one, but it's not really about text. It's got lots of big pictures, and you can look at it again and again and again. It's very inspiring. So Laetitia Barbier's one is subtitled A Visual Archive. And so this has more of an emphasis on the past, and I really respect it for that. I just want to say it can't really be avoided that it feels a little bit like this one came out a year after this one, and it feels a little bit like, you know, you feel what they call the anxiety of influence. You feel that it's almost impossible to bring out a large graphic coffee table book about tarot without being in some way overshadowed by the Taschen version. And you can even see here this pattern here is repeated here. So the book is so influenced that it's actually got some of the same graphic elements. And I think, you know, you've got a white panel on the left-hand side of both, and blah-de-blah-de-blah. I mean, I completely get it. You can't really avoid the influence of Taschen. The Taschen one is better designed. Again, I mean, it's one of the strongest designed publishing houses in the world. My main criticism of this one, even though it is lovely in terms of the material it has in it, is this, you know, these big blocks of text with these long lines. And that's not really great design, is it? Because it's a strain to read them. Taschen has gone the other way, and it puts the text into 2 columns. So the eye can read much more easily. The alternative is that you know, if you're going to fill the text across the whole page, you can actually blow it up a bit so that the font is bigger. But, you know, as I noticed before, as I rather bitchily said before, I don't think the text is the strongest point of this book. I think the text is there to back up the pictures, and it's not a pleasure to read it. It hasn't been printed in such a way as to make it a pleasure to read it. And that's a bit of a pity, because a lot of work has gone into this text. There is a lot of text. It has, you know, it has a discourse about each of the cards, and so there's plenty of text there. But my feeling is that you do not buy this book for the text. There are better tarot books around if you want to find out the meanings of the cards. There are better books around if you want to find out the history of the cards. But let me flick through it, because I do want to give it its due, which is that it's a very nice visual book. You start off with the obligatory introduction by Rachel Pollack, and then off you go. So you have an introduction, then you have a chapter on each major arcana card, brief history. But let me just flick, okay? I mean, I get the feeling that this researcher, this author, has spent a lot of time in libraries. She also includes pictures that are not from the tarot, but you could say have influenced the tarot. So this is a 16th century painting attributed to Jacob Cornelis. Here you have Rihanna. That's a Hieronymus Bosch. So you see in contemporary paintings where tarot artists got their ideas. But when you go into each chapter, you know, you get this rich selection of different packs. Marseille decks, 18th century decks, Taylor decks, weird and wonderful things, playing card decks. It's just a treasure trove. So, you know, that there's one of the very, very early tarot decks, maybe even the first one. It's a bit of a, what's the word? It's a bit of a lucky dip. They're all thrown in there. You know, occasionally you will have a 21st century deck popped in, but most of the 21st century decks are at the end. I mean, I can't show you the whole book, but I just want you to have a feeling of how incredibly rich it is. And there's quite a lot of text underneath the pictures, which, again, I didn't find incredibly good. That's, you know, another frankly, absurdly 21st century take on tarot where, you know, chapter on the Emperor, you get a picture of a woman. But yeah, I'll just show you some more of this at random. I thought the book was reasonably priced, actually. That's a Aleister Crowley painting, which seems to be his version of the Pope because it's got a 5 on it. It seems that you can pick this up for €25, including postage, or maybe 29 or something. And very nice too. So yeah, it's a long book. It goes on like this with great pleasure. I think really it is more interesting than the Taschen book. So I mean, that for me, that's high praise. I think this is the most interesting visual tarot book I've got, that I've come across, that I possess. You know, even though, as I say, the text annoyed me. And then at the end, more reasons to be slightly annoyed, which is that I don't think much of her selection of modern tarots. These for me are the sort of things that are nice to look at and not really terribly good to read with. I had the Ghetto Tarot, I gave it away. I think it's extremely nice, but yeah, not great to read with. At least it's reverent. It's quite near the Pamela Common Smith. And then the Pavlov Tarot, which, you know, I gave a very long review to, I think is a very flawed tarot, and which I have never read within my life, even though I bought it for myself, because I think it's got too many bad cards in it. And I really kind of dislike the point of view that it comes from. As what does she say about it? She says it's really woke-versity stuff. Playfully twisting and turning all previous cultural stereotypes about gender, race, and age, Pavlov blends the liminal towards the beautiful, allowing the voluptuous feminine to express and take space, the masculine to be vulnerable, the young to be wise, the old to be celebrated. I think that young to be wise is a reference to this kind of dreadful hermit card that Mr. Pavlov has put in. I mean, I think in some ways, I think this could have been the greatest modern tarot, but it's not. It's got too much strange stuff in it, and I think, you know, I just think that is kind of emblematic of a moment in time, sort of the crazy 2020s, where everything had to be kind of like, you know, like that. And as I say, I think you can't read with this deck because it's just too sort of, what's the word? It's too prickly. It's too angry. It's too embattled, isn't it? It's not a restful experience. And then, frankly, also she has a couple of decks from the Uzi studio. Again, they look great, but I could never read with them. This is the Pagan Otherworlds, which I've reviewed, and yeah, looks great on the table, but not really a readable tarot. So yeah, there you go. Good stuff. I highly recommend this book, even though it might sometimes sound as if I don't. You have been watching TN Tarot. I'm Robert Farrer, and I'll be back next week with more of this stuff. Bye for now.